Hello, my name is Simon Owens, and this is my tech and media vlog. Today I wanted to talk about the page view, that metric that bedevils the entire media industry, at least online right now, and by which all advertising metrics lead back to. There's this great piece today, long-form article from Franklin Foer in The Atlantic that I saw. And it talks about in depth his experience working at the New Republic after it was purchased by Chris Hughes, which is one of the co-founders of Facebook. And when Chris Hughes first purchased the New Republic, it was kind of viewed as this. He was kind of viewed as this savior of the magazine, someone who could kind of take it out of its, dark depths where. It was kind of like a neocon publication that really hadn't adapted to the web very much. And so he was going to start investing in the technology behind it, really putting a good budget behind hiring top-notch writers. And most importantly, at least to Franklin Foer, was that he was not going to play the same web traffic game that every other website was playing. It wasn't going to succumb to clickbait. It wasn't going to just generate tons of content and kind of a roulette wheel to try to catch on to the Facebook algorithm. And for a little while, that idealism really worked out well. The New Republic was just putting out some amazing journalism. It became kind of a must-read for a brief period of time. But Chris Hughes eventually succumbed to what every publisher eventually goes into, and he started looking at his income versus what he was spending, and realized he was hemorrhaging money on the New Republic. And eventually he started pressuring Franklin Foer, the editor, to start becoming more metric obsessed, using analytics platforms like Chartbeat. And Franklin Foer resisted this whole notion for the initial idealism of the magazine, and for that he was fired, and that led to a subsequent exodus of staffers, and then they hired a new kind of web friendly editor, and now are playing that kind of page view game, and Chris Hughes has gone on to sell it. So you see this with a lot of publishers. This isn't just something that's specific to what happened with Chris Hughes and the New Republic. It was whenever they're interviewed by tech and media publications, they always declare that the page view is dead, that they no longer actually care about page views, that they're going to start focusing on really meaningful metrics like time on site, reader loyalty, return visitors, and so we always think that we're finally getting beyond the page view, but the page view continues, despite all this rhetoric, to still be king. And the problem with the reason behind this is because it's very hard for a publication to reorient ad buyers to focus on whatever metric that they think is important, because the ad buyers, they're not buying at just your publication. They're trying to buy at scale. They're using things like ad tech, programmatic advertising, and they're not just buying on your website, they're buying across hundreds of websites. And because of that, it's really hard for a single publication to influence the industry and the metrics that it's going to live by, when everything that ties into it in terms of how you're building your advertising base is still based on the page view. So basically an individual website is chained to the industry at large, and unfortunately the industry at large still worships page views. That's not to say that there isn't some bright spots in the industry. Most notably, it's in a lot of these kind of newer upstarts publications that have launched within the last 10 years that are either trying to do away or launching without utilizing page view display advertising in their revenue model at all, or they're trying to kind of slowly phase it out or diversify their revenue. A good example of this, of course, is the New York Times. Most of their online revenue was based entirely on digital advertising, and so they've been doing things like they launched first a branded creative studio, and then they launched their pay meter and have had a lot of success with getting paid digital subscriptions. And then they purchased a site called the Wirecutter, which does kind of performance market affiliate advertising, e-commerce. And now all three of those categories are things that happen to reward reader loyalty over page views, which is allowing the publication to kind of wean itself off of pure traffic goals. You see that with BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed never had display advertising as one of its revenue models. It launched a purely native advertising model, and it doesn't sell based on how much traffic it can generate to individual articles. So while it's thought of as a clickbait factory, it's actually kind of the opposite, because they don't have to rely on raw traffic as a means for measuring their revenue growth. A site I just profiled across my different platforms called the Penny Hoarder. They make almost all their money through performance marketing, which is a type of affiliate advertising where they go and create partnerships with brands, and they get paid for how much actual purchases they can drive. Again, they're not beholden to advertising. And you see, the growth of live events, conferences, stuff like that. Again, all these things reward loyalty. So it looks like the industry is shifting away from display advertising. And part of that is because A, they want to get away from page views, but B, because in terms of programmatic ad tech, programmatic advertising, all of that is being eaten up by Facebook and Google. All the gains in digital advertising, 99% of it is going towards those two companies. So a lot of media companies are finally starting to realize that they have to rely on something else besides display advertising, and at the end of the day, that's a really good thing. So I think there's all this hand wringing about Facebook and Google taking all these ad dollars, but in some ways, it's making the internet a much better place because it's forcing media companies to innovate and get away from this thing called the page view, which I think talk about every single thing that makes the internet terrible, from slideshows to pagination to all sorts of cheap clickbait gimmicks. Obviously, it's had a perverse negative effect on the internet. So this entire business model shifting away from display advertising and away from the page view will hopefully be a good thing in the end.